Welcome to today's episode of Behind the Scenes. We are flying high with Dean Wallace. I'm your host, Kathleen Jantz-Koprivnik. In today's episode, we feature a professional photographer and private pilot, Dean Wallace. Dean rented a plane for us from Northway Aviation. We were greeted at the front door by the owner, Jim Grant.
Hi.
The plane was a Cessna 172 with the number N686SP, or November 686 Sierra Papa. Making sure we're safe, eh?
You bet. You want to make sure that there's no wrinkles. If there was a wrinkle in the skin of the plane, it would show that there was a good possibility somebody had torqued the airplane real hard, pulled up, or done something crazy and caused structural damage.
Oh.
In that case, you don't want to go. You still want to go, you just can't go.
Or at least not in this plane.
Not in this plane. That's right.
Fortunately, there's nothing.
This is the fuel. That's the lowest point in the fuel system in that tank, I should say.
Oh, let me get a little close up. What is this again?
This is a fuel sampler, okay? And what I do is I drain fuel from the bottom of the tank into here. If there's water, you're looking for water, you're looking for moisture. If there's water in the fuel, you'll see little bubbles at the bottom because water's heavier than fuel.
Oh.
And also you look for color. There's a blue color to that fuel.
Yeah.
That means it's 100 octane. If it was green, it would be 80 octane, which they really don't even use anymore. And if for some reason somebody had mixed the fuel, they'd mixed 80 octane with 100 octane, there would be no color. So that way you know that there's problems. There again, you don't go flying.
Dean continued to put the plane through the rest of its pre-flight paces, checking the fuel and the oil and making sure that we were safe to fly.
You know, moisture can choke through the fuel system, and yeah, it might sputter a little bit, but when you're up at altitude, if you're up in freezing, it's below freezing, and the water were to freeze in the fuel line, now you got problems. Not only does it not burn, but it stops all the fuel from getting through. So,
What is it you're doing now?
I'm checking the leading edge of the propeller to make sure that there's no nicks in it. You can feel feels a little sandy, like abrasive, almost like very fine sandpaper, and that's actually from rain.
Oh.
Rain actually chews away at the propeller. But what I'm looking for is nicks, like if somebody were taxiing through a graveled area, and if the propeller were to pick up some rocks and it were to nick the propeller, if you got a chip in that, when you're up, it's up in the air, propeller's going at full speed, just the air going past that nick could cause a vibration and cause a crack and literally break off the tip of the propeller.
Oh.
If that were the case, if you lost this much of the propeller, there would be so much vibration that before you could shut the engine down, you could cause major structural damage to the aircraft.
Oh.
So things
That's good stuff to know.
little things you want to make sure you're doing right.
And I can't get up there to see what you're doing.
No. I'm just checking to see how much fuel I got. We're gonna go over and put some fuel in this thing. You can see along the leading edge of the wing a number of bugs have bravely given their lives. I want to know what bugs are doing up at 10,000 feet. just in case you're wondering, these are the ailerons. Okay. The ailerons make the plane turn.
Okay.
Or should I say, bank
Bank?
from side to side.
Okay.
Okay. And if you look at it across to the other one, as this one goes up, the other one is down. It's not that they're broken. That's the way they're supposed to go. And if you were to turn the wheel to the right, this one goes down, causing air pressure to hit
Which then lifts the wing up.
Which then lifts the wing up. That one goes up, which then pushes that wing down, which makes you turn to the right.
Oh, okay.
So, very simple.
And that made sense. Admittedly, I was a little nervous about the prospect of going up in a private plane. However, once I saw how Dean put the plane through its paces, had a chance to see inside the cockpit, my nervousness disappeared and exhilaration took over. This was so cool.
Okay, these David Clark headsets I bought right about the time I got my instrument rating, which was about 22 years ago. Check the density altitude of where we're at right now at Payne Field. At Payne Field, right now standing on the ground, we are 603 feet above sea level. Density altitude is the altitude that the aircraft thinks it's at, even though it's only at 603 feet, because of atmospheric conditions, the heat, the humidity, things like that. It changes the actual altitude that the aircraft thinks it's at. Right now, the aircraft thinks it's at 1,898 feet, and it will respond exactly as if we were at 1,898 feet. In other words, it'll climb slower. It takes longer to get up to speed. If it was cold outside, the air is dense, and you hit the throttle, and it goes much quicker. We take off a lot faster, climb a lot quicker. So there's a lot of different factors involved in flying that you really need to pay attention to.
Before we took off, I handed the camera to Dean and asked him to scan all the dials and gauges, just so that we would have a sense of everything that he has to monitor during flight.
It's a 777 problem.
Dean advised Payne Tower of our flight plans. We were then cleared for takeoff. As the plane left the ground, my heart was beginning to soar. We were flying, and the view was just spectacular. As we left Payne Field behind, we were on to our next adventure in the Sequim Valley Airport. We were going to meet up with Dean's former high school teacher and former flight instructor, Russ Mellon. Your view from the air is both captivating and mesmerizing. You want to take it all in, and everything all at once. The view is just exquisite. Within just a few short minutes, we were coming around and preparing to make our approach to the landing strip at the Sequim Valley Airport. We were instructed to land on runway 27. I tried to grab my camera quickly, but these two longtime friends were so anxious to see each other, they started without me.
Oh, did you see it?
Yeah.
You were
I was
watching?
down there taking pictures.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah, I was at the other end of the
Were you
hangar
really?
down there. Yeah,
Oh,
so
cool.
I shot about 6 pictures on the way on your flare and everything.
You know, I was sitting there thinking, I hope he's not watching this. Well, the density altitude's so far up there.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I'm gonna stitch it, and he's gonna be ribbing me.
No, you did a nice job. Really
Thank
good
you.
job. I grabbed one of my logbooks and I saw a couple entries with your name on it.
Really?
There, yeah.
Oh well. I had all my stuff was stolen out of my car many years ago.
Oh, be darned.
And so I lost that original logbook. So
Amazing.
I have nothing. Oh, 763 Mike, yeah.
Yeah.
Why did I get into flying? I just ever since I was a little kid. I remember sitting in my yard at like I want to say 3 years old, staring up into the sky, watching birds soaring around, and I always wondered what it would be like to be up there, to be able to view from those birds' eyes what they're saying. And it's just something I've always been intrigued with ever since I was a very young child. And then Russ Mellon, my teacher from high school. It turned out he had an airplane. Just through talking to him in school, found out he had an airplane and that he was a flight instructor. And I'd never in my life flown before, never been off the ground. And so he asked me if I'd like to learn how to fly, and that's where it all started. He's the one responsible. I mean, I love to teach people photography, but for you to be able to teach somebody how to fly, and it's not like with driver's ed where you let them go in the car, you know. You're letting them go in the airplane.
Well, in driver's ed, you're still in the car.
Yeah, you're still in the car, right? Yeah.
All right, so what'd you think when you had this character getting in your plane for the first time?
Oh, shoot. You know, it's just dealing and working with young people like Dean is kind of where it's really at. And quite frankly, I don't quite remember how it felt when he got in the airplane, but you remember how it feels when you ask them to go ahead and solo and tell them that they're ready, because it's an experience that until you do it, you don't know how it feels, like getting kicked out of the nest. And then I remember how my heart felt when I soloed, and you have the confidence that you can do it, but you always have that little doubt in the back of your mind as well. But you're being the flight instructor, you have to have confidence in your student, and of course Dean had good confidence, so I wasn't too concerned about it. They want to survive too.
I had a vested interest.
He had a real vested interest.
Yeah, when I remember when I pulled up to the end of the runway and you told me, you explained everything to me, and then you said, and then after you make your touch and goes, I want you to pick me up right over there. And my heart stopped. I went, what? But because whenever we take off in the training, we take off, we'd be climbing out, you'd be telling me, push on the rudder or do something, something just to keep on top of it. And it was so funny because when I took off, I remember distinctly when I took off, I was climbing out. I was waiting for you to say something, and I looked over, and oh my God, you weren't there, and I had to put it back on the ground. So,
Well, it's a confidence builder and a character builder as well.
I think aviation is one of the best things that ever happened to me, as far as learning, just having that, and aviation in general, just being able to hop in a plane. Or Kate and I flying over here today, we're flying along, and she just all of a sudden goes, "Man, this is cool."
Now, you had mentioned the curriculum at the school and the fact that it was going to offer aviation. Would you mind discussing that a little bit?
Well, at Shorecrest High School, when I took the job, one of the criteria for me to be interested in teaching at Shorecrest was the administration there and the district, including Lynn Waller and the superintendent, were in favor of developing an aviation program. And so the concept would be it'd be a 2-semester program, first semester being aerospace aviation, and it would go through an overview of space, the theory of space, all the propulsion systems, guidance systems, all the avenues in space, careers, etc. And then the second quarter would be on aviation, meteorology, phraseology, FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency. We took students down and visited the flight service station in Seattle, the tower at Boeing Field. So it was partially a career exposure opportunity for the students the first semester. And then they gained better awareness of meteorology and the world around them, the science of meteorology, the science of flight. And then if they were interested in signing up for essentially a private pilot ground school, that would be the second semester curriculum. So those students that signed up for the second semester were enrolled essentially in private pilot ground school. So we got into more detail of all of those aspects that you need to study for and be, all the science, the math, the physics of flying, and then they would go ahead and sit for their written exam. So,
and was he in that class?
Actually, Dean preceded that. The curriculum wasn't approved, hadn't been started yet.
So in other words,
No.
no.
But in Dean's case, he was enrolled in a class I was teaching, a plastics program that he was able to keep up with, as well as spend time studying on his own for the private pilot written. So I would kind of tutor him on the side to help him get prepared for his private pilot written.
What does it take to become a pilot?
Lots of money. And a drive. But the requirements for getting your pilot's license, back when I got my license, was I had to have 20 hours of dual instruction. Dual meaning flying with an instructor, my instructor here. I had to spend 20 hours with him in the air and then 20 hours of solo time. That doesn't mean that you have to do the 20 hours all at one time, because like Russ cut me loose in his airplane. He had a lot of faith, I guess, but he cut me loose in his airplane with only 8 hours of total time, and that's when I did my solo. But
and for a student to solo, they have to demonstrate the ability to be in control of the airplane in a safe manner. So you go out and they learn how to slow fly an airplane, stall an airplane, recover from a stall, obviously land and take off safely, and handle most of the general conditions that you're going to come up against in maneuvering an airplane. But you ask the question about what does it take to become a pilot, and not only besides the money part, one of the things I've found as a flight instructor that you could determine probably in the first 3 hours if a student really should continue pursuing being a pilot. And it had a lot to do with their coordination, eye-to-hand coordination. If they didn't have the ability to taxi an airplane down a taxiway to a runway, and they were struggling with that, they're probably going to have a problem. So now they don't have to be athletic, but they still have to have reasonably good eye-to-hand coordination, have a natural feel for it. Not all the students out there should continue to pursue getting a private pilot's license. It's probably not in their best interest.
there's a couple guys I work with. There's one in particular that I know. I will not mention his name. However, he says he's getting his private pilot's license, and I just said, when you finally get it, let me know. I will retire from flying.
Really wanted it so bad they continued
Right.
and continued, and they might end up with 60 hours of total flying time by the time they get their private pilot's license or more. And if it can be an achievement that they're wanting to achieve, a milestone in their life. Mm-hmm. They want to reach that goal, and they'll reach the goal, and some of them don't fly much after that.
I remember a story of a gentleman that I think he was around in his late 50s, early 60s, and that's exactly what he did. He wanted to get his license. He got his license, and that was it. And he quit. Just the.
So I wouldn't discourage anybody from learning to fly, but just keep in mind that if your goal is to fly recreationally and just keep it there, that's fine. Just know what you're trying to achieve with it.
Right. I've always told people that flying to me is, I get up there and I just forget about everything else. Like when my mom passed away back in 72, the day she passed away, all I could think about was flying. I went to the airport, got in the airplane, and took off, and I just flew, and it just took my mind off everything. And maybe it's because it requires such a level of concentration that you can't think about anything else. So it's a release for me. It's a total release, and I absolutely love it. There's nothing like flying to me, and I'm free as a bird.
It's night and day, isn't it?
The first time I ever flew commercial, I had to go in for work. I had to fly over to Spokane. I was an old 727, and you can't see, right? All of a sudden, we're coming in on final approach, and I feel the tail coming around. I'm hunting for the rudder pedal to straighten it out. It was the most uneasy. I had like 100 hours of my own before I ever flew commercially.
Oh, man. Well, now, taking it a step further, Dean has become a professional photographer, and he's now using this ability to fly from one place to another to increase his photography business. Would you mind discussing that a little bit?
No, not at all. It really has nothing to do with the photography. It has to do with making myself more readily available for clients and things of that nature. And I'm much quicker. I can get more done in one day. I have a photography business. I've been doing professional photography for about 27 years now.
What's the name of your business?
Dean Wallace Photo. Dean Wallace Photo LLC. So anyway, I specialize in aerial photography, and I don't use the Cessna. Like what we're sitting next to here is a Cessna 172 that we rented out of Northway Aviation. I don't use the Cessna for the photography end of it. I use the Cessna for getting from one place to another. I have a number of jobs that I do down in Portland, and so I'll fly from Everett to Portland, Hillsboro, land at Hillsboro, and then rent a helicopter out of Hillsboro, and go fly out over downtown Portland or in the suburbs around there and photograph different properties. That I do a lot of commercial work. But the aviation, the flying has made it to where I can do these things for clients. I can be there on a moment's notice. I don't have to deal with the airlines, and I don't have to drive. Driving is so much slower, and it's not nearly as fun.
All right, I had no idea how fast we were flying.
Well, in miles per hour, we were probably doing around 120 miles per hour. But you didn't even feel that. Your hair wasn't even blowing back. The thrust when I gave it the power going down the runway at almost 2,000 feet density altitude, it was like sticking my foot into a bowl full of mush. It was very sluggish, but yeah, about 120 miles an hour. And these planes will fly for about 4.5 hours on a tank of fuel. So you can make it a fair distance. I actually flew. I used to own my own Cessna, and I flew down to California to do some photo work down there, and flew down to Mount Shasta. Landed right down next to Mount Shasta, and there was another time I flew down to Sacramento, and it was really kind of fun because I never landed for fuel until I hit was it Eugene? No, Medford, Oregon, right at the border, right at the California border. So you can go quite a distance in these before you have to land for fuel. And depending on the winds, you can have a nice tailwind and fly quite a distance. In fact, when I went to Mount Shasta, I was doing work down there, and my flight back from Mount Shasta, I took off from Shasta, and never landed for fuel. I had a tailwind that was unbelievable. I forget what it was, but it was about a 50-knot tailwind. I was just screaming. So, lots of fun.
I know on one of your photographic expeditions, you actually went to Hawaii.
Yeah, I photographed a wedding last year. I did not take the Cessna to Honolulu.
Kinda didn't think you did.
Yeah. But yeah, I flew over to Hawaii to photograph a wedding of a coworker, and yeah, that was a beautiful time. Wonderful.
Basically, to maintain your license, you just have to do a biennial flight review, which means every other year you have to meet with a flight instructor and go over. You usually spend an hour and a half reviewing the federal aviation regulations, the charts that you use for flying, reviewing all the things to see if you're competent as far as your general knowledge. And then they take you up and you have to do a flight proficiency test, which will include steep turns about a point, power on, power off stalls, 2 different kinds of takeoffs,
Back
3
up,
different
what's
kinds
a
of landing.
power on, power off stall?
Power on stall would be the same as what you'd call a departure stall. It simulates stalling an airplane after you've taken off from a runway. You've heard of and read of airplane accidents. Oftentimes, but you'll hear about pilots and planes loaded with parachutists going up to do a jump. And of all things, they crashed not too far from the end of the runway. And my gosh, what happened there? Well, you have a fully loaded airplane, usually with 4, 5, 6 jumpers. And you're taking off and maximizing but what happens is you're full power, you're climbing out, and the airspeed isn't sufficient to create enough flow over the wings to create enough lift, and you stall. So it's a stall with the power on.
When you simulate the power, or when you do a power on stall, I should say, you literally pull the nose. I mean, you're climbing very steep, you're holding full power, and you just keep pulling the nose up higher and higher and higher until the plane literally falls like that. It has stopped moving through the air. Okay, and that's basically what a stall is. The plane it no longer has airflow over the wing to create the lift.
Can lead into the next part of an unrecoverable stall, and that would be into a spin. So the idea of a biennial flight review is to demonstrate your physical ability to fly an airplane, covering the basic maneuvers that you would normally cover in a flight exam to get your private pilot in the first place. And then the demonstration, you still have some book knowledge. You understand what the rules of the road are, so to speak. So there's 2 parts. Then you have to take a medical exam, in most cases every other year for most of us. But if you're a professional commercial pilot, you're going to probably be taken every 6 months.
Every 6 months, right.
Yeah. And of course, their proficiency testing to be a professional pilot, i.e. air transport pilot for Southwest Airlines or whatever, is going to be much more arduous, more frequent, more simulator time.
And then there's all good reason for this. Obviously, the older we get, the more we need those tests done, and also if you're flying. If you're an airline transport pilot, you've got to be on top of things like he was saying as far as simulator time. A great example of a phenomenal pilot, and one of the great stories that we heard recently was Sully.
Sullenberger.
No, I'm going on the Hudson. We're going on the Hudson. And I mean, that was amazing. That was amazing that he was able to do that, and it was awesome. So, there's a lot to flying. I joke around about a lot of things, but when it comes to flying, it's all serious stuff. It's more fun than anything I've ever done in my life, other than hug my kids. But flying to me is, it's just, I can't imagine life without flying. And unfortunately, there's going to be a day when I won't be able to pass my medical. I won't get my medical, and then I won't get to fly anymore.
Are there stringent age limitations?
Not age limitations. If you're an airline transport pilot, there's a mandatory retirement at age 60. And yeah, they must retire at age 60, which...
Why? People are still vital and vibrant at 60.
Some people are, but there's just something set in stone for now that says at age 60 you must retire, and there's been a lot of arguments about that. The pilot, his name escapes me, the gentleman that lived in Bellevue who flew was it an L10, not L1011, it was a DC-10. It was a DC-10 that went into Sioux City, Iowa. It was crippled. He cartwheeled in. Granted, there were many people that lost their lives, but he lived. A lot of the crew lived, and it was all because of his experience, and it was just prior to his retirement age.
And these senior pilots, once they get to be 60, they may have to retire from carrying passengers.
Right.
But a lot of them will still fly as a flight instructor commercially for Boeing or somebody else, do test flying, do simulator training for flight crews. As a Rotarian, one of our guys was a retired airline pilot who's now over in Singapore training crews on the 787 for foreign crews that are going to be flying the 787. So there are jobs in aviation as a pilot once you get to be 60, but you may not be carrying passengers for hire in a large air transport. You could still fly like the fellow that's 63 years old that was flying that amphibious airplane that ex-Senator Stevens died in recently up in Alaska. That pilot, flying commercially, single engine C, amphibious airplane with 8 people on board, something like that. That de Havilland that went in up there by Dillingham, Alaska. You always wonder what happens in circumstances like that, but fog, low visibility, even though you're a seasoned pilot, you still can become disoriented. And of course, there brings up the question, 63 years old, did he have a heart attack? And they'll probably have to do an autopsy to see what might have been his health condition at the time that airplane went down. Because the passengers that survived indicated that things seemed to be running normally. Engines seemed to be performing fine. And so, who knows? But it does become more of a concern as you get older. I'm 63 myself and just passed my medical, but it doesn't mean I can't have an issue.
But we're talking about aviation, talking about flying, talking about unfortunate instances, where people have gone down. We only hear about tragic things, that fell out of the sky, and everybody talks about how horrible it is and everything. I mean, when there's many times when things happen with small planes that you never hear about. In fact, there was one just yesterday or the day before over in Chelan. There was a guy in a Piper Cub that his engine quit. He came around and landed it, put it down on a residential street, and landed it right on the street, bypassed the power lines and the homes and everything, and just came in and came to a stop. But you don't really normally hear about that stuff because it's something where nobody died, so it's not big news.
No.
And that's what our news agencies really focus in on is death and destruction. So that you're not going to hear about that stuff, but you only hear about the bad stuff. You only well, I'm sitting next to a gentleman right here that landed an airplane without an engine. Well, the engine was there, but it wasn't operating. The plane that I first flew in, he was flying home from Eastern Washington one evening and noticed the reduction in oil pressure, and he realized he wasn't going to make it across the mountain, so he turned around and flew it until the engine stopped.
too quickly, our visit came to an end. It was time to get out the camera equipment, exchange a few photographs, and then pack everything up, taxi down the runway, and get ready to make our return trip to Payne Field in Everett. On the return trip, I couldn't help but notice that the haze was burning off and the mountains were much more visible than when we had arrived. After taking off, we continued to climb. We will eventually reach a cruising altitude of 3,500 feet. I must not have much of a poker face. Dean could tell from the Cheshire Cat grin on my face, ear to ear, that I was enjoying every minute of my first flight in a private plane. He looks over at me and says, "Welcome to my world." Is that the face of a contented pilot or what? Thanks to Russ Mellon, Dean's first flight occurred on February 25, 1971. Thanks to Dean Wallace, my first flight in a private plane occurred on August 16, 2010. Dean gently set the plane down on the runway, and even though we were on the ground, I knew that my heart was still flying high. What a beautiful end to a beautiful day.